So this project is a project to make a full suspension frame in the US.
A lot of us here have roots in manufacturing from long ago, and so it's kind of a natural thing for us to want to make stuff ourselves rather than just send the designs off to a factory. And so for 6 years now, I've been thinking, well, if we're going to reimagine the process from the beginning, how could we make it more energy efficient? How could we make it so there was less labor involved so that it could possibly be done in the United States and still be cost competitive, or be able to be sold at a price that people are willing to pay. And we did an experiment a while back on one size of one model, and that was a Ripley small that we made a couple of years ago, and that went really well. And that sort of emboldened us to go to the next step, which is what we're doing now, is the entire size run of a potentially popular model.
Yeah, so in about 2014, Hans called me up and he said, "Hey, I'm thinking a lot about making frames here. I think it's possible." And I said, "Yeah, I absolutely think it's possible." The first thing we had to do was kind of start with a clean sheet of paper and go, okay, compared to when we made frames here before in the US, where are the materials at? Where are the process materials at? Where's the equipment at to do this? Because we knew the only way you can make frames in the US, carbon fiber bike frames in the US, is to cut the labor time out of it. And so there's got to be a lot of upfront engineering so everything's lined up and reduce the amount of labor.
Since the labor rates are about 5 times higher here in the US than they are where our frames are normally made, which is Taiwan and Vietnam, we had to figure out how to reduce the labor content of our frames and be really smart about it so that the quality was even better, even though we're putting less, time with hands on the frame.
There's two main differences in our technology that aren't being done in the Asian factories. One is how we do our layup. We really fully utilize what the automated material cutter can do by making shapes that match our frames and pre-kitting them so that there are just a lot less pieces to lay down, and that makes our layup take about half the time.
Just using an automated cutter at its potential is a big advantage. Most of the factories we deal with have an automated cutter, but they don't really use it the same way we do. They're cutting out a bunch of rectangles or general shapes, and then more like paper mache, making a frame. Our pieces are very specific and they're accurate to within a couple millimeters of what they need to be, and each one has exact placement, and they're done in a certain order, and everything is just so that actually makes a big difference.
That process itself reduces the parts count that somebody has to actually lay up onto those mandrels or in the mold from maybe 300 or 400 pieces of material down to about 100 or 120 pieces. So again, that's upfront engineering, saves labor time cutting and preparing the materials, and saves labor time doing the layup. So we are probably talking about, taking the labor to make a front triangle of a frame down from 35 hours, maybe up to 40 hours, down to about 15 hours, 14, 15 hours.
The molds themselves are unique. They're internally heated instead of being put on big platen presses. So they're just far more energy efficient. Yeah, it's just a smaller scale, less heat and energy intensive process. Makes it so we can run it off our solar panels on the roof.
So when you get a chance to reimagine the system of how you're going to make frames, for us, it's an opportunity to reduce the energy consumption. And basically anything you can do to reduce packaging, reduce energy consumption, anything you can do to lessen the impact on the planet. As cyclists and outdoor enthusiasts, we're always going to put that at a high priority. So part of the whole program here of trying to save energy was to offset our use as well. So we've put photovoltaic panels on the roof of the building. And right now we're generating more energy than we're using. And when we're up to full production, I think it'll be about even. So we built a test lab here at Ibis so that we could do a very quick cycle between modifying the layup, molding the part, and then testing the part. And so now we can change the layup, cut out the material, and then do the molding in one day, and then the next day bond the parts in and then test the frame. So we can get the whole cycle down to 2 or 3 days, whereas often it would take weeks to do something like that in the past. So it lets us do more iterations in a given amount of time, which gets us to a lighter, stiffer part sooner.
So the reason we chose the XC frame as our first project in this facility is that it's a much lighter frame than our other frames. So we really want to eke the performance out of this bike, drive the weight down while keeping the stiffness up. It still has to be quite strong and take a lot of impact testing and riding abuse. So that kind of meshes right into what the nature is of what we're doing here, which is pushing the technology, pushing the design, refining everything as much as we can.
It started out basically a World Cup XC race bike, and then we started riding it, and I realized that I gave it a little bit too progressive geometry, that you just outrode the 100 mil travel fork. And so we put a 120 fork on it, and maybe now it's a downcountry bike, but really it's a BC bike race bike or any of these long distance multi-day cross-country races where you're timed on the whole stage and not just the downhill. It's a bike that you can spend all day on. The super steep tube angles are great for going straight up a hill and straight down a hill, but if you ride that bike on more of a traverse type ride, your wrists get tired after a couple hours, whereas this is a little bit slacker, but it makes it more of an all-day bike.
As we went through designing and building this bike, we had to teach ourselves a number of things that we hadn't done before. It was a steep and difficult learning curve, but we usually figured out something to make it better. And at the same time, we kind of enhanced and increased always our respect for our factories and realize how good they are at what they're doing. That's part of why we're making stuff, is to keep us humble. And it works. It's very hard. It's been a huge struggle. But along the way, we've managed to figure out some really cool stuff. And we learned from our factory, and they have learned from us.